Welcome to Hoxlive History of Israel Part 3. Please subscribe for more videos like this, the Exodus and Conquest, the story that defines a people. The Exodus is the defining narrative of Israel's origins, a story of liberation from slavery in Egypt, divine intervention, and a journey toward a promised homeland. More than any other event, it shapes Israel's religious identity and moral vision. Whether viewed as sacred history, collective memory, or a blend of historical kernels and theological artistry, the Exodus stands as a central pillar in Jewish tradition, echoed in Christian and Islamic scripture. But from a historian's perspective, the Exodus poses a challenge. The biblical account in Exodus, Numbers, and Joshua is detailed and dramatic, yet direct archaeological evidence for a large-scale migration of Israelites out of Egypt is lacking. What we do have is a mix of possible historical scenarios, ancient Egyptian records, and cultural memories that align with certain elements of the biblical story. Slavery in Egypt, context and debate. The Bible portrays the Israelites as enslaved under a pharaoh who did not know Joseph. The historical Joseph narrative places his rise to power in Egypt during a time when Semitic peoples were integrated into Egyptian society, a plausible scenario given the presence of Asiatic servants, laborers, and officials in Egyptian records from the Middle Kingdom and Second Intermediate Period. Egypt's use of forced labor, Egyptian kings, especially during the New Kingdom c. 1550 to 1070 BCE, were notorious for using labor, essentially state-enforced servitude, to build cities, temples, and monumental works. Papyrus records and inscriptions mention groups of foreign laborers, including Semitic peoples working in brickmaking and construction. The biblical description of Israelites making bricks without straw finds an echo in these Egyptian texts, although they never name Israelites explicitly. The land of Goshen, the setting of Goshen in the eastern Nile Delta, aligns with archaeological evidence that this region was home to large communities of West Semitic immigrants, particularly during the Hyksos period c. 1650 to 1550 BCE. Even after the Hyksos were expelled, Semitic-speaking peoples continued to settle there, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes under compulsion. The Pharaoh of the Exodus, the Bible does not name the Pharaoh who hardened his heart. Against Moses, scholars have proposed two broad chronological models. Early date 15th century BCE, based on 1 Kings 6-1, which places the Exodus about 480 years before Solomon's Temple c. 966 BCE, leading to a date around 1446 BCE, possibly during the reign of Amenhotep II. Late date 13th century BCE aligns with evidence of Semitic presence in Egypt and the mention of Israel in the Merneptah Stele c. 1208 BCE, which refers to a people called Israel already living in Canaan. The late date theory often points to Ramesses II as a candidate, especially since the Israelites are said to have built the city of Ramses. Moses, leader and lawgiver. The figure of Moses stands at the heart of the Exodus story, a prophet, liberator, and mediator between God and his people. Raised in Pharaoh's court, but identified with his Hebrew kin, Moses embodies the dual identity of an Israelite shaped within Egyptian culture. Historical parallels while there is no Egyptian record of Moses, the motif of a leader confronting a king, and demanding the release of a people has parallels in Near Eastern literature, where envoys negotiate the fate of captives or vassals. Moses' role as lawgiver also parallels Mesopotamian kings like Hammurabi, who received legal codes from the gods. The plagues and the Passover. The 10 plagues that precede the Exodus: water to blood, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock. Disease, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and the death of the firstborn form a dramatic, theological confrontation between the God of Israel and the gods of Egypt. Some scholars have sought natural explanations: Nile flooding patterns affecting water quality, insect swarms triggered by climate shifts, disease outbreaks in livestock, and human sandstorms or volcanic ash causing darkness. However, in the biblical narrative, the plagues are not random disasters. They are targeted acts demonstrating divine supremacy. The Passover ritual, marking doorposts with lamb's blood so that the angel of death passes over, becomes the central festival of Israel's identity, linking the historical deliverance with annual remembrance. The Exodus journey, the biblical account, describes a mass departure, crossing the Sea of Reeds Yam Suf, and wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. The Sea of Reeds may refer to marshlands in the eastern delta or a shallow Gulf of Suez crossing, rather than the deep Red Sea known today. Logistical considerations: a migration involving hundreds of thousands, as the Bible suggests, would leave archaeological traces, yet none have been found. This has led some historians to propose a small group Exodus theory, where a much smaller band of Semitic slaves escaped Egypt and later merged with other groups in Canaan. Their story magnified over generations into a national epic. The wilderness period, the 40-year wandering, is portrayed as both punishment for disobedience and a formative period of nation building. Key elements include manna and quail, divine provision in the desert, the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary, symbolizing God's presence, the law at Sinai, the 10 Commandments and covenantal stipulations. From a historical lens, this period reflects the challenges of tribal cohesion in a nomadic environment. The emphasis on covenant law suggests that communal identity was reinforced through shared rituals and moral codes. The conquest of Canaan, the book of Joshua, narrates a swift, divinely aided conquest, Jericho's walls falling, Ai's defeat, and the subjugation of major Canaanite cities. Archaeology, however, paints a more complex picture. Jericho excavations show the city was destroyed multiple times, but not all align with the biblical timeline. Ai, the site identified as Ai et Tel, was abandoned during the supposed conquest period. Hazor shows evidence of destruction in the late 13th century BCE, which could match biblical accounts. Some scholars favor a gradual infiltration model, where highland pastoral groups slowly expanded into Canaan, assimilating or displacing city-state populations rather than a sudden military takeover. Historical theories: historians have proposed 3 main models for Israel's emergence in Canaan. Conquest model, based on a literal reading of Joshua. Peaceful infiltration model, Israelite tribes gradually settled and integrated. Peasant revolt model, discontented Canaanite peasants, inspired by Yahwistic faith, overthrew city-state rulers and formed a new identity. It is possible that elements of all three models played a role. Theological and cultural significance. Historically debated though it may be, the Exodus and Conquest serve as the foundational liberation story of Israel. God is portrayed as a redeemer of the oppressed. The covenant binds Israel not just to a land, but to moral obligations. The land of Canaan is framed as a divine inheritance, not mere political territory. The narrative would shape Israelite law, festivals, and ethical worldview for centuries, influencing later prophetic calls for justice and freedom. Conclusion: from bondage to nationhood, the Exodus and Conquest, whether seen as literal history, a historical core wrapped in legend, or purely theological epic, mark the transformation of Israel from a scattered people into a covenant-bound nation. The memory of Egypt, the wilderness, and the taking of the land would be retold, reinterpreted, and reenacted across generations, embedding the belief that Israel's destiny was guided by the hand of God.